What's good, Fight family? Welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to be talking about what seems to be the most talked about thing since UFC 304, and it's not Paddy Pimblett choking out Bobby Green in like a minute. It's not Tom Aspinall knocking out Curtis Blades in like a minute, calling out John Jones, getting the fans involved, getting everyone hype. It's not Bilal Muhammad upsetting Leon Edwards as a 3-1 underdog and becoming the champion of the world. No, we're going to be talking about Muhammad Mokaev getting cut from the UFC and basically just, kind of retrace the timeline of events that led up to a 13-0 undefeated prospect, a guy who was basically in the top 5, like right outside of it, had never lost in the UFC, is now never going to fight in the UFC again, most likely. Absolute craziness. So for those of you that probably already know, I'm sure you realize that Dana White cut Muhammad Mokaev at a press conference right after UFC 304. For those of you that don't understand what happened to lead up to this, allow me to explain. So, I believe, I don't remember what month it was, but it was one of these months earlier in the year, a couple months back. Alex Perez and Muhammad Mokaev were set to fight on some UFC Vegas card, and 5 days before that encounter, 5 days before the Perez fight, Muhammad Mokaev encountered Manel Kape at like a hotel or whatnot, and they had a little altercation where Manel Kape headbutted Mokaev, I believe like gave him a cut or something, like almost made it so he had to pull out of the fight, and ever since then they had a beef. I don't know what caused Manel Kape to headbutt him. I'm almost positive Muhammad Mokaev did something to incite that, I don't see him as a victim in this at all, and I think he knows exactly what he's been doing every time he's been put in a situation. But that is what was agreed upon by both parties in separate clips, is that Manel Kape did headbutt him. They did have this encounter. He would go on to have his fight, have a really lackluster fight, and that's what ultimately started like this kind of downfall in the fans' eyes for Muhammad Mokaev, was him losing that boring ass fight against Alex Perez, especially because Alex Perez fought again right after that fight on short notice in the main event and then got a knockout win. So it just made it seem like, I don't know, everything stacked up against Muhammad Mokaev in that sense. But following that, there was a lot of beef between these two. The fight was made between them. I believe it was canceled once too, if I'm not mistaken. But the fight was made. Muhammad Mokaev ends up meeting with Manel Kape again at a hotel. I don't remember like what the situation is for this. I think they're both like with teammates that were fighting on a card or whatnot. I don't know, but they ended up in the same place at the same time. And Eric Nixick, the coach of Manel Kape, even confirmed this. Muhammad Mokaev asked Manel Kape to come with his team to squash the beef, to come take a picture with him, because they're both Muslims and it doesn't look good for the Muslim community, according to Muhammad Mokaev. And when he comes to take the picture with him, they take the picture, and then Muhammad Mokaev sucker punches Manel Kape, and Mokaev's team jumps Manel Kape. So that's what like completely set this beef ablaze, from what I'm understanding, because after that it was all hell breaking loose. Every time they're around each other for UFC 304 for promotional shit, they're always getting into scraps, they're always fighting. They had like 5 people covering Kape, 3 or 5 people, some shit like that, before his fight with Mokaev, like before he walked out. They just had a bunch of people like surrounding him so he wouldn't go and start some shit with Mokaev. I honestly was getting really frustrated at how much these guys were going at each other, because I had a weird feeling that the fight would end up boring. I was holding out hope that it would be a banger, because they both have the potential to put on great fights, and they put on one of the worst fights of all time. It was like Rose Namajunas versus fucking, I can't even remember her name because the fight was so fucking boring. Carla Esparza, the rematch. That shit was horrible. And honestly, this fight was so close to that. The only thing that saved it from being that type of fight was that it was 3 rounds. Dead ass. Like maybe 2 good punches were landed the entire fight. 1 decent takedown. Mokaev gets a takedown on Manel Kape and then tries to pants him. Like literally pulls his ass out to the whole crowd and gets a really stern warning. At the time watching it, I couldn't see the angle, so I didn't know what was going on. I thought he was getting bitched out for just like kind of grabbing the shorts a little bit. No, that dude was trying to fucking like moon the crowd with Kape's ass. Absolute craziness. And now I'm seeing today, literally right now, Mokaev has been on Twitter defending that, saying that he needs to take any opportunity he can get to win that fight because it was personal to him. Absolute craziness to me. He's also since come on and tried to justify what happened, which I'll put on the screen right now with his tweets. He says that the first time he punched outside the cage was more personal. He was the one who was headbutted 5 days before the Perez fight, when he went to shake Kape's hand. And he said that he couldn't sleep. He had sleepless nights because of that. I will say, as a man, or maybe just as a human in general, but as a man in particular, when somebody puts their hands on you and you don't get your lick back, you don't get nothing back for that, someone just gets to put their hands on you and walk away from it, it does leave you with some sleepless nights. I'm gonna be honest with you. I've been through that myself. So I don't doubt him there, but at the same time, I doubt that he was just a victim. I doubt that Cape was just bullying him and, you know, like how he's framing it. And I honestly think it's a fucking deserved case that he got kicked from the UFC. I'm really happy with Dana White deciding that immediately, because I know it wasn't just because he's a boring fighter like a lot of people are trying to put online. No. It's all this bullshit that he had outside the cage. Then he puts on a boring fight, and on top of that, just to add some more context to this, Manel Cape broke his big toe in the first round of that fight. So it means no more exploding into shots, no more exploding into a flying knee for the most part, no more having good scrambles, nothing. When your toe's broken, it takes away a lot of your offense, you know? And he still couldn't even make an interesting fight with a guy that's on one foot. He couldn't even get a finish, let alone make it interesting. I think all of these factors, and then when he pulled the pants down in the middle of the fight, I think that right there, that action is when Dana probably looked over at Mick Maynard and Hunter Campbell, and he was probably like, yeah, we're done with this guy, off to the PFL, which is what he said in his post-fight presser. He says the PFL is going to be getting a nice undefeated fighter. Newsflash, no, they're not. The PFL doesn't have a flyweight division, and as much as I do think they'd pull strings to get Mokaev over there, I don't know if Mokaev wants to ruin the possibility of him becoming a world champion in any, you know, organization by fighting up a weight class, because bantamweight is it's a lot different of a weight class than flyweight, especially if you're really built into bantamweight. You're going to be just so much bigger. It's looking rough for Mokaev. As a fan of the sport and as a fan of undefeated prospects, I am a little disappointed in that aspect. You know, he was like 7-0 in the UFC. He came in at 6-0. He's now 13-0. But I will also say, a lot of his fights are boring. Even when he does get those finishes, they're boring as fuck. It's a lot of just like positional control. I'm not mad at it. It's MMA. We have a lot of champions like that. But, you know, you're not making a great case for yourself to begin with if that's how you're going to fight every single time. You fight with no urgency. And this is a fight where you supposedly hate somebody so bad, you're having so many sleepless nights because they sucker punched you. But you can't even like show that energy in the cage. Are you that scared to lose? Like, is that what's happening? I don't know. That shit honestly really pissed me off watching the card. Like, I remember watching it live and telling myself, okay, Dana, if they make weight, move them back to the main card. This is a main card fight. And then I was so grateful with Dana and Hunter Campbell and everybody that organizes the layout of those cards. I'm so impressed with them because they fucking saw that shit coming. Honestly, they had to have. And they made it so we didn't have to sit through that bullshit fight ruining any momentum later in the card. I'm really glad that that's what happened. And with Manel Cape, if you guys watched my reaction video to last week's card, you're on thin fucking ice, buddy. Like, don't think just because you were kind of the one that was like, I don't know, I guess the victim in all of this, with air quotes. Don't think just because of that we don't remember that you've missed weight how many times now, had how many canceled fights, and then you've put on some boring fucking matchups too. You know, his debut with Alejandro Pantoja, he could have won that fight. I don't know if you guys saw that or if you remember it, but he could have easily won that fight. He just did not step on the gas at all, and he let Pantoja be more active. And he literally could have entered the UFC breaking into the top 5. And he screwed himself off of that. You know, I feel like he makes stupid mistakes in his career, and I don't understand it because he's genuinely entertaining, and he's a prospect that all of us want to see move forward in the flyweight division because we need names there, you know? So it's just a disappointing situation altogether. But like I said, the silver lining is that Mokaev got cut. I don't care if you want to cry down below in the comments about how we're losing an undefeated fighter, blah, blah, blah. It's not fair. No, it's very fucking fair, honestly. If this reminds me of OG Dana White, the no bullshit Dana White, no games Dana White. You know, we see a lot of like lame shit with him and John Jones in the news. We see a lot of lame shit with how he's treating Tom Aspinall, how he does certain fighters. This is a big dub for the UFC. This is a big dub for Dana White. That's going to be all for me today, guys. I'll catch y'all.